Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy. In this video we're going to be creating a simple contact form. You can see it here at the moment. We've just got two text fields and a text area. The idea here is the user fills out the form, clicks submit, and this is sent through to an email address with the relevant data. So let's go ahead and give this a go. I'm going to go ahead and type in my name. I'm going to type in a valid email address. Now this form field here will be validated, so the user will have to provide a valid email address and also a message as well. So hello there, just for example. I'm going to go ahead and click on submit. That's been submitted. We've got this confirmation message, thanks for contacting us. An important point here is that we can't then go ahead and refresh the page to resend it because we're essentially seeing this sent variable here. We'll talk about that in a moment though. And we've now received an email from alex@phpacademy.org, which is the email address that we supplied. And we've also got the message in here. Now the good thing about this is we've supplied the email address that's been provided, and we've put this into the from field, so we can basically hit reply, and this will then send this back to the email address that the user has provided. So essentially it's just a really quick way to get a contact form submission sent to an email address, and then the ability to go ahead and reply to that email directly. So that's basically it. Let's just quickly take a look at what happens when we don't enter anything, which is here. We have a message here, sort of like an error message. The name, email and message are required. So let's go ahead and fill that in, but just sort of put Alex in the email field, for example, and then just hello in here. When I click submit, we get that's not a valid email address. So we're validating this field here. Now the other good thing about this is that you'll notice that these form fields have retained their values. We've refreshed the page, but we haven't actually got rid of these values, which browsers will do by default. So we're keeping these values as well. So we'll be discussing all of these points and creating a basic contact form. So in the next part we'll be starting to write the markup, and then we'll look at some PHP code. Okay, so we're over into our text editor. We've got a basic outline of an HTML document here, and likewise in our browser there is no information here at the moment. We literally just have a blank page. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to be creating the form, then we're going to be creating the ability to process the data that's been sent, and this will be above the doc type here, and then we'll output any errors or confirmation messages down here. So the first thing to do really is to create the form. So we have a form here. Now we're going to have an action and a method, and I'll explain what these do. The action is basically the page that we are sending this to. Now we're going to leave this blank, and the reason we're going to leave this blank is that means that all of the data will be submitted back to the same page, so we can display the errors on the same page just slightly above the form. The method describes how the data is being sent. In this case it's going to be post. We use post data for data that could be long in length, and also that doesn't want to be that we don't want to be shown within the query string in the URL. You might have, if you've ever seen a question mark and then something and then an ampersand and then another value. So we're going to be sending it via post and then accessing it via post in PHP as well. So within here we're going to have a series of paragraphs, and these are going to hold the fields and their labels. So the first input field, we're going to have an input. The attribute here is type, which is going to be text. This is for the name, by the way. We have another attribute called name, and in this case it's going to be name. Now this is the name that identifies the field that we're going to pick up in PHP. We're also going to apply an ID to this because we're going to have a label just above here that's going to identify the label that belongs to which field. So label for equals name. We can end that label, and then in here we can just say name. So we're going to have a line break after that. Let's go ahead and take a look at what that's done. We've got name and then a field here. Perfect, that's what we want. And again, this label just identifies the connection between this field and this label. Okay, so the next paragraph down, we're going to go ahead and we'll start off with a label again, and this is going to be the user's email address. or the customer's email address, and that's going to be labeled for email. So now this input type here, or this input field here, has a type of text. The name of this is going to be email, and the ID of this is also going to be email, so we can connect these two here. The next paragraph down is going to be the message. Now this is slightly different because we're not going to be using an input type, we're going to be using a text area. So we're still going to create our label. Just make sure that's ended. And the for here is going to be message. We're going to give the text area an ID of message. And we have that message there. I've just forgotten a line break up there, so I'll go ahead and add that in. And we also need a line break there. Okay, so the text area is slightly different. It's just an opening tag and a closing tag. And of course we need a name for this, which is going to be message. And we also need an ID as well, which is going to be message. Well, we don't need an ID, but since we're using labels, we want to connect them. Okay, so last but not least is the actual submit button itself. So we're going to have an input type of submit. This is just going to have a value. We don't really need to give this a name, so I'm just going to say submit. So after all of that, let's go ahead and refresh the page, and now we have name, email and message. We can go ahead and click submit, which then has forwarded us back to the same page. You didn't really notice a change. If you watch this icon up here though, you'll see it sort of change. It's basically reloading the page and sending that data. So now that we've done the markup, we actually need to go ahead and try and pick out, well, not try and actually pick out this data. But the first thing we need to do is detect whether this form has been submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and create a starting and ending PHP tag up here, and I'm going to include an if statement. So if this is going to be the condition, and anything within these two braces here are going to be executed or run if this condition is true. So I'm going to use empty to check if $_post is empty. Oh, sorry, is not empty, because that means that the form has been submitted and the post data has been taken or read, can be read through this page. So if this post array is not empty, we have submitted a form. So I'm just going to go echo submitted. So we can test this out. Just hit the page and click submit, and it says submitted. Hit the page again, nothing's been submitted, but when we click submit, it has been. So let's just go ahead and briefly look at this. I'm going to go ahead and echo some pre-tags, pre-formatted tags, and within here, a comma separates this. I'm going to say I'm going to say print r $_post true. Now what this is going to do is it's going to show us the contents of this post array, and it makes it a lot easier to determine what data we're actually working with, and it gives us a good insight into what we need to pick out from this post array and why, more importantly. So let's go ahead and just submit this. Now you'll see here we've got an array, we've got an element called name, an element called email, and an element called message, and they're all blank. So how about we go fill this in? Let's go ahead and type in alex@phpacademy.org and hello there. So when I click submit, this data is now placed into each element of this array. So when we want to access this data, we can use this $_post array, and we can pick out name, email, or message, or all of them. We can loop through them and all sorts of stuff. So what we want to do now is obviously get rid of this. Now that we've determined that the form's been submitted, we're going to hold errors somewhere because we're going to be error checking. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable called errors, and this variable is going to be a blank array, or an empty array rather. Now what I'm going to do is just define each of the fields that we need, so name, email and message, and then apply the value of these to these corresponding variable names. So name equals $_post. Now remember, we had this array with name, email and message in here. So all we need to do is provide this basically, and that will just take the value of name. Okay, and we do this for email, And we also do this for message. Message, not page. So let's just pull these across, or tab them across just so they're a bit neater. So now each of these variables within PHP corresponds to the value that the user's typed in the form. That's essentially it. Now what we want to do is we want to do a few checks to make sure that they're empty, or if they're empty, or if the email address is valid, etc, 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 etc. But first of all, let's just go ahead and echo out each of these values just so we know that they're being passed through, and we have access to these in PHP. So what I'm just doing here is I'm applying spaces between these, echoing out the name, a space, email, a space, and message. So let's just go ahead and hit F5 and resubmit this data, and you'll see here that we've got Alex, space, my email address, space, and the message. So we know that this data is there, we can do what we want with it, check if it's empty, manipulate it, whatever we want to do with it. So in the next part of the tutorial, we're going to actually be looking at validating this, in fact, let's do that now. So we're going to be checking first of all if these values are empty. So we're going to create an if statement, or an if else statement, and the condition for here is going to be if the name is empty, if the email address is empty, or if the message is empty. We need to store an error somewhere to output later. So we're going to use empty. So if empty name is equal to true, or empty email is equal to true, or empty message is equal to true. Now obviously if you had, say, another field on here, you wanted to add another field but you didn't want it to be required, you just simply wouldn't add it in this if statement, and then this condition would this condition would be false. So in this case what we want to do is we want to add an element to this errors array. So we've created this errors array up here, and errors this will allow us to just add a new element, and in this case it's going to be name, email, and message are required. So otherwise we want to go through and validate a few more things. So we're going to be validating stuff like the email address, but let's just take a look at how this looks. I'm going to go ahead and print R on this errors array. So let's just take a look here. When I click submit, you'll see that we now have this array output, much like we did with the post array, and the first element has this error message in. Now if I enter all the data that's required, so these aren't empty, and I click submit, we just get an empty array. So that's great. We now know that if the errors array has stuff in it, it means that we have an error or a few errors, so we can output these errors. So in the next part we're going to be doing stuff like validating the email address and then actually sending the email. If we do have any problems, we're going to come down here and we're going to output any problems that we have. Otherwise we're going to redirect the user to the sent page, and we're also going to look at the problem of these form fields, which we've basically already seen. If we enter some data here, or if we leave out message and we have an error, these two pieces of data disappear, or the form field data disappears. So we're going to be looking at that problem as well. Okay, so we have already built the form and the ability to retrieve the data that the user submitted on the form. Now what we're going to be doing is further validating this. So we've already validated the fact that the three fields that we've supplied for the user need to be full. They can't be empty. So we use print our errors to check the errors array that we're appending errors to. But we're going to go ahead and get rid of that and just add another condition in here to check the email address, whether it's valid or not. So if the form fields are empty, we get this, or any of them are empty, we get this error. Otherwise we can go through a list of however many if statements we like to perform additional checks. So for example, we could check, we might want the name not to contain any numbers. We definitely want the email address to be valid, so let's go ahead and start with that one. So I'm going to say if filter var, and this function is just going to basically perform a regular expression. It's almost like a regular expression. So I'm going to say email filter validate email. Now if that's equal to false, then what are we going to do? Well, what does this mean? First of all, it means that the email address hasn't matched the expression that would be expected for an email address. So we're going to yet again append another email address on. So I'm going to say that's, remember to escape this character, not a valid email address. And the reason I escape this character here is I'm using single quotes here, and you'll notice that if I don't include this, it's sort of, the string stops there, so we need to escape this character. What else can we do? Well, let's just do something for the sake of it, just so we can get two errors output. I'm going to say if ctype alpha is equal to false, and I'm going to check the name. Now, what this basically means is that the name that we supplied, or the name that the user supplied, must be alphabetical. It can't contain numbers. So otherwise, we're going to say name must only contain letters, not letters, letters. Okay, so right, let's take a look at the errors array again, and let's try and force some errors in here quickly. So nothing. We've got this name, email, and message are required. Name, I'm going to put a few ones or ABC1. Email, I'm going to put in an invalid email address and just type something in the message. Click submit. That's not a valid email address, and name must only contain letters. So now what happens if we just put ABC1 but then we type a valid email address and then a message? We only get name must contain letters. Then we finally say, well, you know, I know what I can do now, so I type all my correct information, and we get no errors. So now we've validated successfully. You can add more validation depending on what fields you want to add to this. So now what do we want to do? Well, we want to output the errors properly. At the moment, we're not going to give the user a result of or a visual representation of an array. We don't want to do that. We want to output down here. So we've done our validation up here, now logic up here. Now is the time to come just above the form, and we want to perform an if statement to check whether this errors array is empty. Now if it's not empty, that means that there are errors, so we need to loop through these errors and output them. So empty errors. If this is equal to false, then we have errors. So I'm going to echo the start of an unordered list, and down here echo the end of an unordered list, which is basically a list of bullet points by default. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use the for each construct to loop through each of the elements in this errors array. So errors as error. So for every error, call it error. For every one of the errors, call it error. And then echo a list item. And then between here, output the error. So now what we can do is when we click submit, we get this unordered list. Let's go ahead and inspect it. You can see you've got an unordered list with a list item. If we go ahead and type in, I don't know, ABC1 again, and then just Alex and then hello, and click submit, we've now got two list items because we've looped through them errors and output them in each list item here. Perfect, so we've output any errors if there are any. So what happens if there aren't any errors? Well, we do all our processing up here, so we need to perform another check just after our checks to see if this errors array is empty or not. So we would say here, if empty errors is equal to true, so if it is empty and there's no errors, we want to send email. We want to redirect user. So we're not going to do that just yet. We're going to leave that till the last part. But we have a problem here. Now, if I go ahead and enter my email, my name correctly, I enter my email address correctly, but I forget a message for whatever reason, and I click submit, you get the error message. You go, oh, right, okay, I need to, enter a message, but this and this has now disappeared, which is extremely annoying. So what we need to do is we need to create some logic just within these input elements to output a value if the data has already been submitted. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to open and close PHP tags within here. And what we can do is we can sort of echo out whatever we like. So we can say echo value equals test, for example. And what that will do is when we refresh, we get this value of test in there. And that's because we have output value equals test within here. No PHP, just HTML output, which is really useful. So what we can do is we can create an if statement here. And this if statement is going to check if this value is set. So we're going to use isSet. And we're going to say $_post name. Now if this is equal to true, that means that name has been set, i.e. does it exist, is it available, basically does it exist. In that case we want to go ahead and echo value equals and then some data in here. So we'll go ahead and just concatenate on, not concatenate, but use comma separated values for the echo construct. And we want to echo out $_post name. What we want to do though is strip tags, and this is important because what we can actually do is we have this problem where we can pass through any code that we like really in here. I don't see it being a massive issue here to echo strong and then my name. Yeah, so we basically want to strip these out. I mean, it's not a massive issue, but we'll go ahead and do it anyway. So strip tags name, and what this will mean is that when we enter tags like we just did and click submit, they're stripped out of there. So just really sanitizing, generally sanitizing. So the same with email, let's go ahead and do exactly the same thing. In fact, we can just go ahead and copy and paste this just really to save time more than anything. And we can just go ahead and change around these values. So this will be now email and this will be email. Now for the text area, it's exactly the same. But this time it doesn't go in a value, it goes within the text area tags. And that's message and message. So let's go ahead and just submit something. So I'll go ahead and submit Alex, my email address, and I won't fill that in. I click submit. These have stayed the same. This I completely forgot that we added value equals something, so we don't need that at all. As I said, it's just text that goes within there. Let's go ahead and refresh, click continue, and there we go. So now I can type in hello, and that's fine. If I, for example, enter an incorrect email address, it tells me, but all this data is still available for me to go and correct. So we've now created it so it's a lot easier to use and it flows a bit better, but now is actually sending email time. Now if you are working on a local server, you're going to need to set up either SMTP email or configure your installation of Apache PHP to handle sending email, or your installation of PHP. And we have a video tutorial on this, so you can go ahead and watch that now. So we're going to be using the mail function to send the email. So what we need to do is we need to provide 4 parameters here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create these now. And what we need to send is we need to send to the email address that we want this to arrive at. So in that case, that's going to be my email address. So all contact form submissions are going to go to my email address. Here is going to be the subject, so I'm just going to call this contact form. And here is going to be the body. So in this case, it will literally just be the message from the user. What we're going to have now is the headers from. So from would be, and then the email address. So we want to concatenate on email, and this will show that it's from this user's email address, and therefore we can directly reply back to them as we saw in the first part of the video. Okay, so what we now want to do is redirect the user to a page that's going to allow us to say your message has been sent, not show the contact form, and not allow the user to hit F5 repeatedly to keep contacting us. And in this case, it's going to be exactly the same page. We're just going to pass a get parameter or get variable along to this page. So we're going to use the header function, and then we're going to exit afterwards. And in here, we need to say location, and then we need to give a location that we want to redirect to. In this case, it's going to be index.php. The query is just going to be sent, and that's it. So what do we do now? Well, let's go ahead and just check this works first. So, Alex, type in my email address, type in a message, click submit. Okay, so we've been sent to index.php and then a query sent. Go over to my inbox and the email address, the email has arrived with a message. So it's all working in that sense. But now we need to actually say to the user, well, you know, it's been sent. So what do? Well, we need to pick up on the fact that if this has been passed or not, this sent thing here. So what do? Well, down here, just above here, we want to say if something. So if is set equals true. We check it for $_get this time, not _post, and we want to check for sent. If this is set, i.e. if this is here, we want to go ahead and echo thanks for contacting us within paragraph tags. Otherwise, we want to do all of this down to just underneath the just the last part of the form. So I'm going to open PHP tags and put an ending bracket there. So you can see that my text editor highlights this start of this bracket here and the end there. And I'm going to go ahead and indent all of this just for readability. So let's run through this. The user submits something, we process everything as we've already discussed. If there are no errors, we send the email, redirect the user to sent. The page then loads. This evaluates to false, so none of this runs. But in fact, we come down and we say if is set sent, which it should be if we have no errors. It echoes this out. Otherwise, if the user's just landed on the page, this doesn't count, so we just output all of this stuff here. So it's entirely logical. If it doesn't make sense, run through it very carefully and look at the process, and it should make sense. So now let's go ahead and just do this one more time. Name, email address, and let's just change this to something like Fred, hello there. And I'll also do a new line. Go ahead and click submit. There we go. So we've got this sent here. Thanks for contacting us. We hit F5. Nothing happens. It can't refresh this. We've got contact form here from Fred at phpacademy.org. Hello there. And we have some new line data. So we have now created a contact form using PHP.